I'm Tom Monahan, President and CEO of DeVry University. During today's digital dialogues, I'm going to be talking with Alexander Bant, author of Not Doing List and Chief of Research for CFOs at Gartner. I'm excited for this conversation. We've begun to explore the fact that new technologies and the ability to work from anywhere have the potential to greatly increase collaboration. But we're also learning they may come with a dark side. Technology can create urgent work that can distract us from vital strategic priorities. We're also seeing some evidence that can harm colleagues' well-being, leading to burnout. However, our guest, Alex Bant, has proposed a new solution, the Not Doing List, a tool for taking control of your work life and focusing your energy on your highest and most important and valuable priorities. Alex, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, Tom, I appreciate the invitation and look forward to our conversation.
Thanks very much for joining us. We're excited to have you here. I should note that in addition to being an author, Alex also has a real day job as Chief of Research for CFOs at Gartner. Please keep in mind our conversation today doesn't feature Alex speaking on behalf of Gartner's stance on leadership. The views he will share are his own, and they're from his own experience as a practitioner. We're really excited to have you here, Alex. Let's just jump in. I'm going to start with, you and I have worked together, so I'm going to start with two revelations about you that I think are pretty relevant to this conversation. First and most importantly, you're not a professional career coach or an organizational development person. You came to this topic honestly, as a leader of people, of teams, of businesses. Can you tell me just a little bit about your day job and how it led you to focus on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely, Tom. So and thanks for the introduction. So I'm our Chief of Research here at Gartner in the CFO business. So Gartner is about a $4 billion organization that serves 45,000 leaders across the globe on their most pressing priorities around technology and management. And in the CFO practice, we help more than 3,500 CFOs around the globe kind of get their digital transformation right. And in doing that, we need to write amazing research and have experts that can advise on how to actually implement that research at our client organizations. As we do that, you can imagine serving thousands, tens of thousands of clients around the globe and writing research on a whole multitude of topics and hiring experts on all the latest digital areas. We have to make trade-offs, right? And so I kind of say, I get paid to make sure that we don't do the right things, i.e. research that's not relevant and not have experts that aren't relevant. And so I spend a lot of my time trying to figure out what's unimportant that we actually don't need to be doing for our client organizations. So this topic is, as you said, Tom, kind of organically come about for me in the way that I manage our business to make sure that we channel all of our energy and effort into the things that are really important for CFOs around the globe.
And the second revelation, and this is in the spirit of full disclosure, you and I have worked together, and I have to kind of out you as a collaborative and innovative leader. And I say that because if someone just handed me a book called The Not Doing List, I would look at it and say, oh, it must have been authored by a reclusive jerk who doesn't work well with other people. So I share that partly because you've got a broad management toolkit and broad leadership toolkit, but you chose to focus on this topic in particular. Tell me a little bit about, of all the leadership skills you have, what made you sort of go deep and really learn and teach on this topic?
Yeah, and it's interesting. Everyone that I talk to about the book says, oh, it's because of the burnout and the pandemic, right? And I'm like, well, I feel like that was a crescendo to a lot of trends that have already been taking place, which is we have more data, more distraction, more technologies, more ideas, more information flying at us from all different directions, all hours of the day. And so everything can seem like a good thing to spend time on. And so Not Doing List it's not about doing less. It's about deciding what's unimportant so that you can remain focused on the really important things for the business and for your career. And I'll take you back, Tom. I mean, it was 7 years ago or so now. Aisha Armstrong, Harvard Business School. She was just an amazing leader. She was my boss at the time. And we were trying to run a new product for CFOs. And every week we were trying to get about 15 different kind of research priorities to kind of move forward. and none of them were really moving forward. And we realized we were trying to do too many things at once, right? And so that's kind of where the genesis of this came from. We together agreed, let's actually make a list of what we're not going to spend time on this week, right? And so that was kind of the genesis for this. And then as I've actually started to work with leaders on the concept of making trade-offs and deciding what's unimportant, I've realized how hard it is. And it's really hard, no matter if you're the most junior employee or the CEO of the organization, understanding what is unimportant and then committing to not actually spend time on that is really hard. And throughout the book, I've looked at leaders such as Tim Cook at Apple and Jeff Bezos at Amazon and Brian Niccol, who's one of the most impressive digital CEOs over at Chipotle. And they all have this emphasis on deciding what is unimportant and making sure that their entire organization does not spend time on the wrong things so that they can channel all of that time, energy, and effort into the few things that matter most to deliver the best products in the world.
Terrific. Can we just double click? What is a not doing list? What is, I think we're all familiar with you have a great section in the book where you do a great job explaining how this work fits into the kind of the arc of personal productivity and leadership narratives and give it its place, which is fantastic. And we've heard so much around to-do lists and crossing items off, et cetera. What is a not doing list?
Yeah. I mean, so formal definition we'll put out there, and then I'll kind of break it down. It's basically a predefined, and that's important, predefined list of low value things that you commit to yourself to not spend time on so that your time remains concentrated on the most important work. And I think we'll talk about this coming up, Tom, but it's not something you use in a vacuum either, right? Like you don't go in a corner and make your not doing list and then just tell everyone no. It's a collaboration tool too. And it's something that allows you to have a dialogue with folks internally at your organization about what's unimportant. Now, kind of the genesis for this is it's straight math, really, Tom. Everyone gets 168 hours, whether it's you or any CEO in the world, 168 hours. And so it's almost a budgeting tool in my mind that allows you to proactively say, this is where we're not going to spend any of those 168 hours. Mm-hmm. And so similar to you taking your income and deciding how much money you can spend across the year, this is just taking your 168 hours and deciding what you're not going to spend those hours on across the week. Another way to think about it, Michael Porter, who's a famous Harvard Business School professor, kind of has a famous quote that the essence of strategy is choosing what not to do, right? So in the book, we talk about this is your strategy, right? The hardest thing to do when you're formulating a strategy is making the trade-offs around what is not going to get any time and resources, and that's what this is really all about.
Let's go back to a point you made where obviously you didn't sit down and write this book in the middle of the pandemic. It's something you've been working on building towards, but it does seem, it seems this work, which was always really important, has suddenly become really urgent. We see more and more data, whether Adam Grant's data on languishing, data on burnout, data on turnover spiking. You see a lot of ways in which what was a brand new joke 18 months ago of we don't work from home, we live at work, is now not funny anymore. It's now something everyone accepts, and as we move toward a hybrid world or an always on world where some of the important distinctions have been blurred, this feels like really important time to embrace this. Can you talk a little bit about from the standpoint of a leader and manager, confronting this world of burnout and languishing and blurred distinctions, how you'd advise a leader and manager to use this tool as a performance management tool?
Yeah, and I mean, I'll start just real time, Tom. Like we have staff coming to us, at our organization saying, I got to have a month off, right? Like I've just kind of hit my limit in terms of ability to kind of keep moving forward. It's not that I don't want to work here. It's not that I don't want to work anymore. It's I have just hit a wall for the near term. And I think we're all feeling that. And in fact, I mean, survey data would say 95% of HR heads tell us that burnout is the number one thing that's inhibiting their ability to retain workers. So it's kind of on all of us to figure out a solution here. And really a not doing list is kind of proactively deciding what's unimportant and what is not going to get in the way of you kind of conquering every day and every week and moving closer to your goals, right? I think, just to kind of throw another stat out there, you mentioned Adam Grant's article on languishing. I really enjoyed that. He also had another quote that is that 72%, or excuse me, 72 times a day is how often we're checking our emails now, right? 72 times a day. And so if you break that down, it's not just within the 8 hours of the workday, it's like all hours of the day and night. And so a not doing list is partially also agreeing with what kind of distractions like that are no longer going to kind of take us over and rule how we spend our time. It's more about being kind of in push mode and in driving mode, driving to the destination throughout the day and figuring out where you're not going to stop along the way. So it's all about kind of shutting some of those notifications off, setting some of those boundaries. In the book, we actually look at 25 different categories of things in the workplace, whether it's meetings or email or projects or data that could eat your time away, and figuring out kind of a strategy to limit what you're actually going to spend those 168 hours on. So if you're an individual contributor, it's really important to work with your boss on those things. Again, we can't go off and kind of do those things independently. We need to collaborate with those on our team and our superiors to make sure that we're making the right trade-offs. And if you're a manager, I think as a leader, now is the time to kind of lead with more empathy, understand that we can't do it all, right? And a not doing list is the tool that allows you to have a constructive conversation about those trade-offs and eliminate the low value things that are less important so that we can channel enormous energy into the few things that are.
Terrific. It's like asking someone, who's your favorite sibling or who's your favorite child. So I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit, but I'll ease my way into it by telling you my favorite kind of piece of low hanging advice from the book, because there's a lot of things you can sort of take and just use right away. And I'm going to ask you what, one or two kind of quick hit things where you say, lots of great ideas, but just go do this one. My favorite was the idea of asking at the end of a meeting, was this worth it? What did we do right? What did we have? Spend just a minute. If you think of any leadership team meeting, the epic expense of convening a leadership team or a board of directors or whatever, and then not managing that investment, it really struck me. So that was my, no ifs, ands, or buts, I'm putting that into practice immediately moment in the book. But what are a couple of your kind of, kind of go-tos? I know it's a rich toolkit, but I'd love to ask you who your favorite sibling or favorite child is, I guess.
Yeah. And on that point of meetings, I was working with a CSO over at a large insurance company last week, and we were joking. We were like, you rate everything else in your life. Like you talk to a telemarketer for 2 minutes, and it's like, rate this call. We don't ever stop to rate the meetings we're in. So I think there's some room to run there. For me, I think the biggest one is using an agenda with your boss, right? And it's not. And here's the fatal mistake, and I don't want people to just do this, which is don't send a list of everything you're working on. That is not an agenda. The agenda has to be properly crafted in a way that allows you to tell a story, right? Elon Musk, whether you love him or hate him, has a famous quote that is, we get paid in direct proportion to the difficulty of problems that we are solving for our organization, right? And so tell your boss about the problems you're solving. That is the permission that then allows you to make trade-offs about what you will not spend time on, right? So the agenda starts with a story about what is going really well. Then you can get into, here are the risks, here are the opportunities, here's where I need help, here, and bring some data. And the richer you can make that agenda and the more time you can invest, the better your one-on-ones will be. High Output Management by Andrew Grove, who was the former Intel chairman, is another great book about, I think he has multiple chapters on how to formulate these agendas, but it's really important, and it's almost the permission, Tom, that allows you to make trade-offs across the rest of your not doing list.
Can I push a little deeper into that? Because one of the things I think the book does exceptionally well is it gives one of the pushbacks. The first pushback I would have if someone handed me this book would be like, probably a reclusive jerk, probably never managed people, probably not known by their colleagues as not a good collaborator. That turns out not to be true. The second is, easy enough for you to say. You run a large organization, I run a large like we can get in the business of do this, not that. I'm not spending time here, I'm not spending time there. For you can imagine from any one of a number of other vantage points early in your career, if you're from a different socioeconomic background, sometimes these things play out by gender, by color. It is that we're having honest dialogues around privilege, and it does seem like you could argue the ability to say no is a marker of privilege. How knowing the book goes into great detail, maybe there's two questions here. One is, how do you respond to that? And then secondly, I thought the book was really prescriptive around how to not do stuff. It's one thing to say don't do stuff. It's another thing to give someone the tools to do it. So if you can react to the macro thought, but then maybe dig a little bit into tools you've seen be successful with people.
Yeah, absolutely. And for sure, like this is, as we're driving towards more inclusivity across not only the C-suite, but the broader, every organization is trying desperately to make headway. As we do that, we as leaders need to be cognizant of where we may unduly be burdening certain groups. And what I mean by that is there are groups that are trying to, in my mind, almost cover more ground more quickly and really make it known how strategic they are, how important they are, and how influential they are to the organization. We as managers, we as leaders need to create the capacity for that to happen. So I would say it's what you celebrate, right? So you as a leader need to make sure that we are celebrating when people have actually said no to unimportant things and made trade-offs, right? We cannot just promote people that tried to do it all and burned out, right? If we have somebody from a diverse background that's really making a name for themselves, let's celebrate not only what they achieved, but all of the low value things that they committed with their manager to not spend time on. And I think that is, as a leader, one of the most important pieces of this. And also, I think if you are in that position where you are from a diverse background or you're a minority in the organization, it comes back to the story, Tom, that you are telling about the impact that you are having, right? It just breaks my heart when we get to the end of the year and that I hear that a manager told somebody they're not strategic, right? Like, what do you do with that? What that really means is I didn't understand your story as an individual. And so it's you as it's us as managers need to work with our staff, but also staff need to really hone in on telling their story about the big things that they're having an impact on. And that's kind of to your macro thought. I think that the two things coming together, what we celebrate and the individuals having a story that creates an environment where more diverse backgrounds can kind of thrive and actually use this concept of a not doing list. Now, I think your second part, Tom, was more.
Second question, how do you say no? How do you say no? Because the book doesn't get to the end of like the you should say no portion and say, now just go forth and say no. Right. So maybe talk a little bit about some of the tools you've seen be successful. And I think you do a great job laying out situations, but it doesn't end with, so therefore say no to stuff. It ends with here's a toolkit for, here's a toolkit for doing it.
Yeah, absolutely. And really it's about, at the end of the day, it's all about remembering that saying no is all about actually saying yes to something more important, right? So the book is not walking around, telling people no and then, sitting on a beach. It's walking around, figuring out what's unimportant so we can go spend time on those really important things. Now, if you break that down, the way that we communicate, we actually should never say no, right? We're never going to use the word no because that actually, has negative connotations. We're also not going to make it about ourselves. So we don't, make our trade-offs about I, my, and me, right? They're more about you and the organization and what we collectively need to achieve. So we go through some of that. Then what we get into in the book, Tom, is breaking down kind of the different types of people that we work with in our organization. There are those that know how to use their time really well. They think strategically about allocating their hours. We want to talk to them about trade-offs and focus, and we can probably pull out our not doing list and show it to those individuals more easily. Then there's individuals that are running a million miles an hour and probably are burned out and want us to burn out a little bit too, because they're, working all weekend. Well, we need a different type of communication to show them how we're also trying to run at the hard things just like they are. And then there's others in our organization that are maybe not moving as quickly as us. Maybe they, have been kind of in their role for a while, and we need a different toolkit to actually kind of, put at bay some of their requests and some of their work. And so in the book, we kind of break down these different groups and talk about how you as a leader need kind of a different toolkit depending on who you're working with in the organization to actually communicate what is more important, I'll say, not just say no.
I think we're coming up on time, so let me throw out one last question for you. We've had this project underway, and project is probably a strong, dialogue is probably a better word for it, at DeVry, that circles back to the original Harvard Classics series, which Charles William Eliot, president of Harvard, said, if you can do everything on the shelf, read all these books and know them, you're an educated human being. We'll set aside the value of that exercise back then, but we're starting to sort of say, look, the toolkit for personal and professional success in the digital age probably needs some new skills and capabilities. So we're kind of constructing our own 5-foot shelf of what are the must-have skill sets, capabilities, disciplines, et cetera. What would you nominate for inclusion for either leaders or individual contributors to succeed and thrive in the digital environment we've created?
Yeah, so I would have to say this one is going to be all about data, Tom, and we talk about this a little bit in the book, which is, the amount of data that we have available to us as leaders in any organization is multiplying at a exponential rate, right? And so using a not doing list is all about deciding what data we don't actually need, but then also what problems are we not going to go chase after solving, right? So if I'm getting, a 70, 80 page PowerPoint data set every day, there's 100 different business problems that I could observe in the data, right? And me as a leader, I have to make trade-offs about which of those I can live with and I'm not going to chase after right now because we're chasing after more important problems. So I feel like this avalanche of data that's happening at most organizations will send people chasing after solving the wrong problems. Not doing list is a management tool to agree on what problems we're not actually going to go solve right now so that we can go solve the most important things for our customers.
Yeah, it's really an interesting point. If you look at the explosion of data available to managers and leaders, and none of these are perfect systems. So if you go, there are infinite targets of opportunity, and how you actually move the biggest and most important ones becomes one of the most important things. Well, this has been terrific. I really appreciate your making time for us today. It's been a great discussion. Thanks to our audience who are looking in on this. Obviously, you can find Alex and I on LinkedIn, and please do also follow DeVry on LinkedIn to be the first to hear about future digital dialogue events where DeVry leaders, my colleagues, and I talk with alums, business leaders, and more. For those who heard the reference to Aisha here, she also has a great new book. So as I'm quite enjoying that, I think it's safe to say that Alex, you've triggered one of the next potential guests with your walk down memory lane as to how this came out. So I appreciate that lead. Thanks everyone, and Alex, thank you very much.
Thanks, Tom.